The first thing that I'll start out with is, I don't know everybody's game in here. I don't know how good everybody is. I'm sure that we've got a couple people in here, a couple kids in here who are going to be good enough to play at a Division I level. But just statistically, going by the pure numbers, more than likely most of you will not be able to. And that's not a criticism of your games. That's just the way it is with college golf. As Chris pointed out, there are only 4.5 scholarships available for D1 men's teams, only 6 for women. So the competition is really, really tight. Unlike football or basketball, where there's a really clear delineation, Division I players are great, Division III players, a Division I team would destroy a Division III team. In golf, it's not quite like that. There's not as much of a delineation in talent level. There's a lot of really good players at Division III. Just for whatever reason, they decide to go to a D3 school, weren't recruited heavily by a D1 school. So there's a really great talent level. The biggest thing as you're moving forward in your recruiting process is that at D3, there are no scholarships available for athletics. That's really the big difference. Division II, there are some scholarship opportunities as well, but there are none in D3. There are academic scholarships, academic grants that are available from the schools, but nothing for athletics. So it is definitely something for you to consider as you go through the recruiting process. Chris had gone over a little bit of the stats before with the sheet and how many schools there are. There are over, the numbers are huge, the amount of D2 and D3 schools out there. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity for you at those schools. And really the biggest plus to going to a small school is you have a chance to play right away. At a D1 school, you could go to, and I'll tell you a little bit of the story here about one of my players that went through this. You can go to a big D1 school and you can just end up sitting on the bench for 4 years. And I always thought it was really important that you have a chance to play because that's really why you want to be on the golf team. It's great to be on the team and to be able to go to practices, but if you don't have a chance to play, it could probably get a little, frankly, I would think it would be a little boring after a while, if I was sitting on the bench all the time. So at D3 school, you really have an opportunity to get in there and play a lot. It's definitely something you should think about as you move forward. The great thing about this area, there are a lot of small colleges in the northeastern United States. The majority of Division III schools are in the Northeast. There's really very few in other parts of the country. The upper Midwest, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin has a lot of schools. The western half of the country, there's very few. A majority of them are concentrated in the Northeast, especially Pennsylvania. There are a lot of Division III schools in PA. So there's a ton of opportunities around here. One thing that I will tell you, one of the kids, we always used to, when we were playing, when you want to get into playing golf, you kind of want to go where the weather's good. You want to go south or west if you can. So the one catch about staying in this area is the weather. The weather is not always that friendly in this area. So another thing really to kind of think about. And I'll kind of circle back to that a little bit. So what to expect when you're going through the recruiting process and you're thinking about a small school, like a Division III school. But one thing that I think is really important, one of the things that are very important is that not all D3 programs are created equally. You're going to find a varying degree of involvement from coaches as you move forward. And just programs in general. Division I, a lot of the coaches at that level are full-time, or maybe they're a teaching pro and they're also coaching as well. So really golf is their life. Division III, you'll find a variety of coaches. A lot of the small school coaches were retired guys, retired athletic department personnel that just happen to take over the golf team. A lot of schools like to have their basketball coach be the golf coach, which is always kind of a strange thing because generally that guy won't know too much about golf. It's just something for him to do in the fall and spring, so the school can justify paying him a salary. Nice guys, but they might just not really be able to work with you on your game or create that kind of atmosphere you might be looking at. So it's always good to kind of, if you're looking at small schools, to look into that, look into the background of the coach and what they're all about. A story once, one of our home tournaments early on in my tenure with the team, I had a rival coach come up to me and introduce myself, and I said, "Hey, you must be the coach for this team." And the coach said, "Oh no, because I'm just a chaperone. I'm just the van driver." I said, well, you are the coach, correct? He goes, well, yeah, but I just drive the van. I thought, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to play for a program like that. And unfortunately, one of my players overheard that conversation, and spread that around through the team, so that ended up becoming kind of a thing that players like to talk about for the next few years. Was that particular coach, the van driver, we call him. Nice enough guy, but didn't know a whole lot about golf. So you're going to find that in some areas. So it's definitely something for you, like I said, to look at as you're going through. Make sure you find out a little bit about the coaches, because there's definitely some different levels out there. It's really best for you to be aggressive when you're looking at small schools and contacting the coaches, as Chris had kind of hinted at a little bit. A lot of these guys are not full-time. They definitely care, but they don't have a lot of time to go out and hit the road on recruiting trips and come to you. So sometimes you kind of have to go to them. So that's where that resume is really important with small schools. You can prepare a decent resume and get a coach's email and send it out to the coach and kind of catch their eye a little bit. That's a really important thing for you guys to do. The pool is so large of talented players that you could fall through the cracks if you're not being proactive. Certainly the coaches will come and they will find you if you're the really good players. But if you're kind of, that middle tier of player, they might not really know much about you, or be reaching out to you. So it's always good to try and, we say that, the squeaky wheel, or what is the phrase? Sorry, I lost the phrase I was thinking about. So it's best to be loud. It's best to be aggressive. So all of that. You also won't find a whole lot of true teachers of the game at the D3 level, but you're really looking for a coach that I think that sets a good tone and a good atmosphere. A lot of these guys, you're not necessarily, like I said, club pros. A couple of them will be, or will have been at this for a long time. But you're really looking for a coach, I think, that sets a nice, easygoing atmosphere, sets a good tone all around their program. That's a really important thing. And once again, be careful where you go. If you're really serious about the game and you really want to play, some programs out there, I would always refer to them as glorified intramurals. Where the team just go out and practice, the coach isn't even around when they're practicing. There's no real sense of family, of connection in the program. It's not a good chemistry. That's always stuff I try to create with my teams. So once again, just a good thing for you to ask. If you go to a recruiting trip to a small school, talk to the players, find out exactly, what kind of atmosphere that coach is creating, because it can differ quite a bit at the small school level. Almost every kid that I recruited, when I would recruit a kid, I would always ask them, who are you looking at? What other schools are you talking to? And every now and then I would get a kid who would be like, well, I'm looking at a D2 school or a Division I school. And I would say, okay, that's great. And then if the kid would eventually, not come to Penn State, not come to Penn State-Harrisburg, but would go to one of those schools, and I had a couple, who were good enough players to do that, I would keep an eye on them. I would kind of watch the results and see how they did. And I probably had about 4 or 5 that were able to go to a higher level. And every single one of those kids was off that golf team within a year. It's just that, it's that tough thing where sometimes they sort of overvalued their game a little bit, and they just weren't able to make it. And myself as a coach, I got pretty good at recruiting that I could be able to tell right away, well, this kid's probably not going to make it at a higher level. And it's unfortunate, it's sad, I certainly don't want to see that happen. But, every single one, there's one right now who's playing at a Division II school in Pennsylvania. He's actually doing pretty well. So it looks like he might be the first one that might actually be able to make it and be able to stay on the team for a couple of years. So it's another one of those important parts where just, be honest with yourself and be honest with your game and get a lot of feedback and make sure that you're putting yourself at the right level. I had, conversely though, there is the other way this goes. I actually had a kid on my team this past spring. He actually transferred to us from Maryland. He was a freshman. He was going to Maryland, but he was sitting on the bench. He was good enough to make a roster, but he wasn't good enough to make the starting 5. And, he came to me late in the fall semester, said he was looking to transfer. I had known about him when he was in high school. I had talked to him a couple times in high school. He transferred to us, a D3 school, and this past spring he immediately became, he was our #1 player, and he was our conference player of the year, and he got to play in the national championship. I mean, now, which was, I thought was a great trade-off for him. He was really happy with how the decision worked out. He's still there now. He's still the #1 player on the school, on the team. Where at Maryland, he would still be sitting on the bench, be the number 9 or 10 player. But he was able to play in a national championship, conference player of the year. I think that's pretty good. So, just something else to keep in mind. It's always good as you're going through this process to make sure to rank what's most important to you. At the D3 level, because there are no athletic grants offered, academics is really important. I always would tell kids going through the recruiting process, you really want to look really hard at the academics because, once again, not knowing all of your games and not, the chances of you being able to make a living at this game professionally it's pretty slim. So you really need to make sure that you've got a really good solid degree. At a Division III school, academics are stressed. It is #1. There would be times when we would have practice. If a kid had a class, go to class. Don't worry about practice. Academics are the #1 thing, and they should really be at the top of your list. Make sure you're going to a school you've got a good major. Golf is great, it's important, but it's #2 after making sure you make it to class. And then you also want to make sure there's an active, enthusiastic coach. As I hinted at earlier, that's something you really want to make sure you're looking at, and really look at the overall quality of the program. Look at the program historically and how they've performed. If they've been really one of the better schools in their conference, that's an important thing for you to look at too. And as I said earlier, the worst thing that can happen to you is if you go somewhere where you can't play. You really don't want to do that. Chris had talked earlier, he went to a school down south, and down south it is pretty competitive, but as I said, there's so many schools in this area in the Northeast, Pennsylvania. I think Pennsylvania has the most Division III schools of any state in the country. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's close. There's just so many great opportunities here relatively in your backyard for you guys to go and play. So what's the experience like of being on a small school team? Tim, who was my intern this past summer, he's got the one that wrote the Week of the Life there. It's in your packets. He goes to Albernia College. Albernia also played the national championship this past year. They were fortunate enough to win their conference championship. So they've got a really nice program right now. So definitely read that. It's an important piece in that packet. I thought that was one of the neatest things that we've got in there. Because a lot of the stuff he's talking about is really what happens. For me, we would practice about 3 times a week as a team. It's not an everyday thing at small schools. Whereas at the D1 school, you're working every day. The NCAA rules stipulate that you have to take 1 day off, but most teams are going to be out there 5 or 6 days a week practicing, which is great if you love golf, but it can also get to be a grind. I can imagine maybe some of you are out there practicing a ton right now, but at that level, it's, you're definitely stepping it up a notch or 2. At the D3 level, at a small school level, like I said, it's a little bit less. We do it about 3 times a week. I create opportunities for the guys that are home course to go out and play whenever they want to, whenever they want to hit balls. We work out a deal with our home course every year to do that. Some schools do not do that. Some schools don't have full team practices. Some schools coach will say to the players, okay, just go out and practice and bring me back your scorecard and make sure a teammate signs it. And that's your practice session for the week. Maybe they might do that once or twice a week and the coach will never be around, which I always thought was kind of strange, but that's because at that level, once again, some of the coaches they don't have as much time that they can devote to it. So you really never know. You've got to be able to trust that your kid is going to actually, put a good score down on the scorecard, put a correct score. So I always thought that it was my responsibility as a coach to go with the team as much as possible for those practice sessions. So that's a good question for you to ask in the recruiting process. Just ask about, hey, what's your practices like? What happens at your practice? It's a great thing for you to know, because all of my players have always said that the best thing that they liked about being on the team were the practices.